Wars leave behind ruins, treaties, and stories of heroes. But hidden beneath the smoke and rubble is something most people forget. Every major war has also rewritten the rules of money. The way we spend, save, borrow, and even trust our currency today is the direct result of battles fought decades ago. Without World War I, the gold standard might have lasted longer. Without World War II, the idea of governments borrowing trillions of dollars might still feel unthinkable. And without the conflicts of the modern era, the US dollar might not hold the strange global power it has today. Think of it this way: wars don't just decide who controls the land, they decide what we carry in our wallets, how stable our paychecks are, and even whether our savings hold their value. In this video, we're going to follow the trail of how war transformed money, from the glitter of gold to the promise of paper, and finally into the mountain of debt that defines the financial system today. So let's start at the beginning with World War I, the war that broke gold. Before World War I, most major economies were tied to the gold standard, meaning every paper note in circulation could be exchanged for a fixed amount of gold. It gave people confidence that money was real, that it had weight, that it couldn't just be printed out of thin air. But then came 1914. The cost of a global war was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Troop mobilization, weapons production, food supply lines. The bills piled up almost overnight. And suddenly, the gold standard, which had looked so strong in peacetime, became a massive problem. Why? Because gold is finite. You can't conjure it up quickly. If countries had stuck to the rules, they would have run out of money long before they could pay for armies and supplies. No government at war was willing to let that happen. So, one by one, nations quietly suspended the gold standard. Britain, Germany, France, Austria-Hungary, all of them stopped promising that their paper money could be converted into gold. Instead, they printed more notes to keep the war machine running. For ordinary citizens, this was a shock. Suddenly, the solid money backed by gold was replaced by paper that was only valuable because the government said so. Prices rose sharply as more currency chased the same amount of goods. Inflation was no longer a distant theory. It was daily life. Germany felt it especially hard. By the end of the war, their currency was so weakened that it set the stage for the hyperinflation crisis of the 1920s, when people carried wheelbarrows of marks just to buy bread. World War I proved something that would never be forgotten. In times of crisis, governments will choose survival over gold. The sacred link between money and metal was broken, and it would never fully return. This was the beginning of a new reality, where trust in money wasn't about gold reserves, but about the government's promise. And that shift would only grow stronger in the next global conflict. By the time World War II began in 1939, governments had already learned one lesson: you can't fund a global war with gold. This time, instead of trying to tie their hands to metal, they leaned into a new strategy: debt. In the United States, war bonds became the cornerstone. The government ran huge campaigns urging citizens to buy bonds as an act of patriotism. Posters showed soldiers charging into battle with the slogan, "If you can't go, give." Buying a bond meant lending your money to the government in exchange for a promise to pay it back with interest after the war. It worked. Ordinary Americans poured billions into bonds, not just out of financial sense, but out of duty. The government raised the money it needed while keeping people invested, literally, in victory. But bonds weren't the only tool. The US also put strict controls in place, rationing food and gasoline, limiting wages, and directing factories toward war production. These measures helped prevent runaway inflation, even as the government printed more money and borrowed heavily. Other countries did the same. Britain sold war bonds, rationed goods, and leaned on its empire for resources. Germany financed much of its war effort through forced loans, occupation plunder, and massive debt, pushing its economy to the brink. What World War II really changed wasn't just how money was raised, but the mindset. Before, massive national debt was seen as dangerous. After the war, it became normal. Governments had proved they could borrow extraordinary amounts, fight a world war, and still recover on the other side. By the time peace returned in 1945, the gold standard was a memory, and the idea of using debt as the backbone of national finance was here to stay. Problem is, wars don't just strain governments, they reshape everyday life. On the home front during World War II, money took on a new role. In the United States, ration books became as important as dollar bills. Families needed coupons to buy essentials like sugar, meat, or gasoline. Even if you had cash in hand, without the right stamp, you couldn't purchase certain goods. Money itself wasn't enough. Access was controlled by rationing. This created strange side effects. Black markets flourished, with people trading ration coupons or paying extra under the table. For some, cigarettes became a form of currency, especially among soldiers overseas. A pack of smokes could buy favors or goods in a way paper money couldn't. Wages were also frozen in many industries to keep inflation under control. Instead of raises, workers were encouraged to buy war bonds. It was a way of channeling extra income back into the war effort, keeping money circulating in a controlled loop. Across Europe, the situation was even harsher. In occupied countries, official currencies lost credibility as Nazi authorities extracted resources. People turned to barter or underground trade, relying less on official money and more on whatever could actually get them food and fuel. The lesson was clear. During wartime, money changes from being a free tool of choice to a managed system of control. Governments directed how it could be spent, saved, or traded, and ordinary people adapted however they could. In earlier wars, governments bent or broke the gold standard, or leaned heavily on war bonds and rationing. The money system was stretched, but still tied to visible things: gold, coupons, bonds in the hands of citizens. Modern wars look very different. The US, especially after World War II, entered the Cold War with a unique advantage: the dollar. At the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, the US dollar was tied to gold, and other currencies were tied to the dollar. For a while, gold was still in the picture, but America controlled most of it. By the 1970s, even that link disappeared when the US abandoned gold entirely. From then on, money became pure fiat, valuable only because governments declared it so. Wars after that were funded not with gold reserves or mass citizen bond drives, but with borrowing on a massive scale. Take Iraq and Afghanistan. Combined, those wars cost the United States several $1 trillion. Unlike in World War II, the government didn't ask citizens to ration or buy bonds to cover the costs. Instead, the money was raised quietly through issuing treasury bonds to global investors and foreign governments. The debt piled up, but daily life for most Americans went unchanged. And this is where the comparison becomes striking. In the past, wars meant direct sacrifice, rationing at home, higher prices, patriotic bond drives. Today, wars are often financed almost invisibly absorbed into national debt. The impact is delayed, showing up years later in budgets, interest payments, or inflation. The reason this system works at all is the US dollar's global dominance. Since oil is priced in dollars and central banks worldwide hold it as their main reserve, America can issue debt on a scale no other nation can. Wars that once demanded visible sacrifice can now be fought with borrowed money, backed by the dollar's status. The result? Modern wars reshape money less in the daily lives of citizens and more in the balance sheets of nations. The financial burden is still there, but it's hidden, deferred, and global. From gold coins in vaults to stacks of war bonds to trillions of dollars in government debt, every major war has left its fingerprints on money. World War I broke the gold standard. World War II proved that debt could power an entire economy. And modern conflicts showed that with the US dollar on top, wars can be financed almost invisibly through borrowing. The pattern is clear. When survival is on the line, the rules of money bend, and sometimes they break. What we think of as normal finance today is really the product of generations of crisis and conflict. So the next time you hear about a war overseas, remember this: it's not just about politics or soldiers. It's about the financial system you use every single day. And the money in your pocket is, in a way, a legacy of those battles.